All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Just realized that I had the wrong settings on Facebook, so hopefully it'll work now. My name is Chris Bear. I'm producer of Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie. This is Unstuck Kids Speak Out, episode 12. We've made it 1 year. I'm really excited today because today's guest is a young adult teen who's had OCD, and we're going to talk today about how she dealt with OCD, how her family dealt with it, and how therapy works. So feel free to share this out with your networks and your community. I'm going to share this with the Unstuck Facebook group right now. We're going to have like 45 minutes or an hour and take your questions. Feel free to like and share this. If you happen to be watching the replay, feel free to add a comment. And whenever you watch this, we will certainly comment. And just sharing this out to the Unstuck group right now. Hold on 1 second. And Tori, if you're here, let's just grab a comment, and then we'll invite her in. But Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie, is a movie about kids with OCD. They tell their story from their point of view, and they talk about how OCD affected them and how different issues work. And this is a chance for me to talk to other kids, hear their story, and for you to ask questions. So Tori's going to join us very shortly. Once she accepts, you'll see her kind of added over there, and we'll start talking about OCD and how it affected her and things like that. So if you have any questions as we're talking, feel free to use that comment button. Hey!
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. This is really cool. Just so everybody out there knows, Tori and I have been connected through the film site and through basically through Instagram. She runs a really great Instagram page called Mental Health Facts. I'll put the link down when our conversation is over. She's got a huge following, and we kind of started chatting maybe like 6 months ago?
Yeah.
And I just said, hey, I do this thing called Kids Speak Out. Would you want to be on? And finally, we were able to schedule. So this is really cool. So welcome.
Thank you.
And both of us are on the East Coast, so it works well on a Sunday. So I would love you to just kind of get started. Tell me a little bit about your OCD and kind of how it affected you. I know that, you've been dealing with it for a long time. So maybe just talk about some specific things, and then, we'll start answering questions. Hi, Melissa.
So I would say that I probably had OCD since I was younger. And when I was 10, I would say that was when it got a little bit worse, but yet it wasn't really noticeable. Whenever my parents would go out for a dinner or whatever, I would have to do this thing where I would knock my feet together, then knock on my knees, then go like that. Because if I didn't do that, then I believe that something terrible would happen to my family, like my parents when they were out. I remember there was this one day, my mom asked me why I was doing that. And I didn't really say anything because I didn't know myself. I didn't know why I was doing that. And then I remember another time in school, my friends at the time, they would ask me what I was doing. And then I remember one of them was doing the same thing that I was doing, which is kind of weird because I don't think they really understood it either. So
they were almost following along, thinking, oh, maybe you're doing some kind of new handshake or something.
Yeah. So
when you were 10 years old, you had no idea what OCD was, but you felt compelled, when your parents would go out to dinner or maybe leave the house and leave you with a sitter or something, that you had to do this kind of thing with your knees, and what was a ritual, you just didn't know what it was.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then how were you diagnosed right after that? Did you have to, did other issues come along?
So I actually wasn't diagnosed with OCD until I was 18, which was only a few months ago.
Yeah.
So, but I remember in middle school, I was had very bad social anxiety. I remember in classes, I wouldn't really speak. Like I wouldn't like speak up for myself. I remember this one time when I was in middle school, my teacher sent my mom an email saying like kudos to Tori for like, cause like I guess I spoke in class or something like that. But I also remember that I knew that I was somehow different from the rest of the kids because like I saw how they were able to like just like talk to each other, have a good time. But like I was always like that kid that was like sitting alone in a classroom.
Yeah.
But like yeah, like I remember I used to do sports like soccer when I was younger, but I quit when I was around 11, I would say. And I think OCD had a big factor in that because I remember like getting nervous that like the ball was gonna like hit into my face and I would somehow get injured. So it was like something I was like very fearful of. I remember I would like avoid practices. So
So it started to seep into the other things that you love, affecting, I guess, you were worried about, my guess is you weren't just worried about the ball hitting you. It was like some other catastrophic thing that would happen because the ball hit you.
yeah.
That's one of the things about OCD. It's not just, oh, I'm gonna, I might get a broken nose. It's like I might get a broken nose and that might cause some weird thing that will kill me or it might hurt my parents for some reason. There's necessarily not a real logic. Folks, I'm talking with Tori. This is Unstuck Kids Speak Out. If you have a question for us about OCD, please feel free to share this out or answer a question. We're just going to have a conversation. I'm kind of getting to know her a little bit, but we've been chatting offline via Instagram. So you just described it took you 8 years basically to get really diagnosed. And
Yeah.
if you look at statistics, it basically says most people wait between 7 and 9 years to get diagnosed. So you fit within that. Was there something that, what was the thing that somebody finally said, or maybe you said, or a mom or dad said that was like, wait, this is OCD, this is not something else?
So last year when I went off to college, so I knew that I had OCD even though, wait, so I'm just gonna back it up a bit. So let me start from this. So when I was 15, I had like an entire mental breakdown. I was like at this program in Upper Manhattan for like my entire sophomore year of high school. And then it wasn't until I would say March of 2015, I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, but not OCD yet.
It's interesting that you say March 2015 because that's about the time that some of the kids in the film were also going to a program in Manhattan that started therapy. My daughter started a few months later. So it was kind of like at the same time you were discovering OCD, we were as well. And so, you learn about obsessive compulsive disorder. Is it the therapist that tells you about it? Or do you start reading about it by yourself? Like, how do you get to know what an obsession and a compulsion is?
So I actually started researching it on my own without like any professionals like explaining it to me. I would often, a lot of times, um, watch the OCD Stories podcast, and
Yep.
and then I stumbled upon Unstuck. So, yeah,
That's how you learn about the film.
yeah.
Yeah, Stuart's fantastic, and he's. I think that podcast has really taken off, which is fantastic. And he's, every week or every month interviewing lots of new people. So it's a good resource to kind of hear not only from doctors but also from people who have OCD. And what would you say, like, if you had to describe in your own words what an obsession is, what would you describe it as?
I would say that it's a recurring thought that just plays over in your mind over and over again. It just doesn't stop, I would say.
Yep, it's a good description. And what about a compulsion?
I would say it's like an act, like, say, like knocking on like a table for something to like neutralize a thought, to like relieve anxiety. That's it. Yeah.
Yep. And then did you have any did you have any like mental rituals that you were doing that maybe weren't, I know you were talking about the kind of knees and kind of thing when your parents would go out. Were you doing anything else in your head, or were you counting? Were you evening out, or any other things that were kind of, was it showing in that way as well?
Yeah, I would say yeah. Yeah, like I remember I would like replay conversations over and over again in my mind, or like even something like schoolwork. I would be like thinking about like schoolwork all the time, like even when I would be like out hanging out with friends, like the only thing on my mind was I have to go back home and I have to get the schoolwork done.
Was it because you just needed to like, uh, this is finished, or was it because you were like worried about being perfect and like it was affecting you, like writing and making everything perfect, or making sure that you didn't get anything wrong? How was OCD affecting you in school?
So when it came to schoolwork, OCD like would demand that I did schoolwork all the time. It would be like the weekends. And like instead of going to the mall with like my mom or like my sister, I would be at home doing schoolwork because I felt that if I wasn't doing schoolwork all the time, and then I would be a bad student and that like my grades would somehow like plummet because of me not doing schoolwork all the time.
And what in your head, what was the consequence? Was it failing? Was it like getting kicked out of school? Like, what was OCD saying that, was really going to happen?
Failing, not getting into a good college, not doing well on an exam, just all sorts of things.
So it was really kind of like, and it's interesting that you bring up school because it does affect kids in different ways. And you started talking about how it was, it started out where you would notice things about home and your family and trying to protect your family, kind of like magical thinking, where something you thought something you would do would magically protect your parents when they went out to eat or out of the house. And then it kind of seeped into school, something that you really cared about, took you away from your sports. OCD has this way of kind of pulling you apart from everything you care about and finding the things you care about, and suddenly they become the real harm.
Yeah.
Um, uh, in with how are you able to handle that at school? And how do you handle it differently now? The pressures of college and things like that.
So back in high school, my whole life was basically OCD with like schoolwork consume me. And then my freshman year of college, so last year, my first semester was awful. I was like spending all day doing schoolwork. I wasn't doing anything else. I did the theater guild, but the entire time my mind was thinking, I have to go back to the library. I have to go back to doing schoolwork. So then my second semester was when it all went downhill, and then having to take a medical leave because of OCD just got so bad.
And yeah, and you realize that, okay, mental health has to come first before
Hmm.
the school, which in a lot of ways is a big victory. The way you're describing how OCD was affecting your schoolwork, and it was making you like really focus and so so focused on your schoolwork and like doing everything and making everything right, that deciding that, I'm going to put school on hold and take care of OCD. In a lot of ways, I look back at that and I think she that was her first big screw you, OCD.
That was like the hardest decision was taking a medical leave. I was like crying for like 2 months because I was like, I have to be in school. I have to be in school. I can't be taking the leave. Like school, school, school. It's so important. And so as I look like back, I'm like, this is the best thing I could have done for myself.
That's great.
Hmm.
So Melissa, I see your question here. So hold on one second, Tori. I want to get back to school, but let's talk about Melissa's question. She has a young daughter who's 9, and she's noticing that OCD kind of, you know, spikes and then maybe isn't an issue. So, for your experience, does your OCD go away throughout the day, or is it easy to hide it, or like, so how would you describe how your OCD affects you throughout the day?
So I would say that I like, I have like really good times throughout the day where like OCD is not a problem whatsoever. Like I'm able to live my life. But then like all of a sudden, like OCD just strikes. And like for instance, going out to the mall used to be a major challenge for me because things just didn't feel right to me. So like I would be like walking in the mall with my family, and then all of a sudden I would just be like freaking out for like no reason.
Was it like, do you think it was because you realized all these people were around you? Was it like you couldn't go to a store? Or what, do you, looking back now, do you understand maybe what triggered you?
Um, so not really, honestly, other than things just like not feeling right to me. I still don't really understand it myself. So,
Um, so yeah, Melissa, I would say that what you're describing sounds like OCD is maybe not gonna bother your child 24 hours a day. It might really depend on what is a trigger for her and what and where it might be triggering. So, for example, in my experience, my daughter really was never bothered a lot by school and in school. Tori is describing a lot of these, like, OCD affecting perfectionism and how she really needed to focus on getting her schoolwork done and always be thinking about school and being a really good student. My daughter, it didn't affect her. However, we had a real problem with things in the environment. So rocks and trees or things she thought could be poison, like like a Gatorade bottle with a little bit of Gatorade on that was thrown on the ground, that would cause a lot of spikes. But if she was at home, things were generally fine. So the way you're describing this, though, OCD kind of going up and down makes sense. And your daughter may not be hiding it; it just may not be bothering her at the right moment. But if you have to kind of find the things that are triggering you, and that's what you kind of work on. So that kind of actually. By the way, everybody, if you want to leave a comment, feel free. We're asking questions. I'm going to keep talking with Tori. I got all my questions, but I'd love to take yours as well. She is a young adult with OCD. You're welcome, Melissa. And has experience, so can definitely talk from a real personal point of view. And so I would like to talk about you took a leave of absence, and then how did you first learn about, and what did you do to start getting back at OCD and start fighting what was bothering you?
doing exposures, I would say. ERP all the way. Definitely, yeah. So with schoolwork, when it I like when it comes to writing essays, I would spend all day writing essays because every sentence has to be like had to be perfect to me, like or else I would just like fear that I would get a bad grade or whatsoever. So so first started with exposures. First started with writing a sentence and not changing it, just like sitting with it, and then eventually got up to writing like two sentences and leaving it be, then three sentences, and so on. I'm still working on that now, but it's gotten a lot better.
And that, I would imagine, from, and just like hearing from what other kids have said, that writing that first sentence and sitting with it was very hard at first.
Yeah, it was so difficult, but over time it gets easier and easier.
You almost like, so how long do you think, doing exposure therapy, how long do you think you spent writing that one sentence, just trying to getting over that one sentence?
Hmm. I would say maybe like a few minutes, like 5 to 10 minutes. It would take.
And your anxiety would spike, and you're sitting with that sentence, and then suddenly, magically, however, it just goes down.
Yeah.
And if you're watching, that's kind of how exposure therapy works. You start with something that, if you're the thing that you're afraid of, in this case, that was driving Tori's OCD was this, need to do schoolwork and make sure it's absolutely, perfect and focusing on school. So they had to figure out, well, what's a simple way to start getting her anxiety up. but, you know, allowing her to move forward. And that was just as simple as writing one sentence. And then once she was okay with getting once, you know, I'm sure the first time you did the one sentence, it caused a lot of anxiety, but by the fifth or sixth time, it wasn't as bad. And that's why you started writing 2 sentences and 3 sentences. So slowly with exposure therapy, you kind of build up to more anxiety. Did you ever get to like writing an entire essay, you know, like 3 pages without going, you know, going overly editing?
No, right now I'm still working on writing paragraphs, but I'll eventually reach the writing essays, like 3 pages or something.
And that's another it's a really great point is that you're constantly working on it. Even those things that you might have gotten over, you still want to, you know, you still want to revisit and show that OCD, you know, you're still stronger than your OCD. So Tori's still working on a lot of those, you know, those issues that she was working on a couple months ago. What are some other exposure examples that you can remember, you know, your therapist working with you with?
So the first ever exposure that I actually did was reading. So I would have to read something over and over again because I felt like I missed something or I didn't really understand what I was reading. So it first started with I would read a sentence. And then once I got better with that, then I would read two sentences. Then eventually a paragraph, then a full page, then multiple pages. And so now it's like it's not even a problem for me.
Yeah, so now you've gotten over the reading thing, which is great. How was your family affected by OCD, and were they involved in your therapy as well?
Um, so when it comes to my family, whenever like they would want to go out and do something, I would be like, no, 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 I want to stay home. I don't want to go out because things didn't feel right to me. And then at the time, I was also doing a compulsion that involved my computer. So I would want to like stay home and do that. So like, and then after time, I like my family was just like, whatever, just let her stay home. So
Yeah, they were accommodating, you know, and saying, well, you know, if you're just gonna stay home, did they understand what was driving that, or it was just like, oh, Tori's being difficult?
oh, it's just me being difficult. Yeah, that was
And
what it was.
if that happened today, how would they treat it differently?
They would make me go, despite however I felt.
So we had before, you know, we came on. I had asked some people in our Getting Unstuck Facebook group some, you know, like areas to focus on, and one of the things was people wanted to kind of know more about family involvement and how that works. So, you know, you were talking about how OCD, you think it started around 10 years old, then you really weren't getting diagnosed till maybe 16 or 17. So dealing with it like your family was dealing with it was really ingrained. I'm sure they were accommodating with you. How did your family get retrained or learn about OCD?
So my mom, so I like whenever we would go out, for instance, like I love Starbucks, but I would sit in the car and then she would go inside and get the Starbucks for me. So instead of doing that, I now go in myself to go get the drink. Or like before I wouldn't go like out to the mall, but like now I'm able to do that. So
And did mom and dad have to actually, you know, figure out, okay, got, you know, like a therapist would say, you know, this is what's happening now, mom and dad. You actually have to, you know, you can't stay home, and you know, you have to get out.
yeah, like I'm really good with it now, but like like my mom still has to like remind me, oh, you should leave. Like, no, you can't stay home. You have to come. And I don't care how you feel. You just have to come. So,
Yeah, they work on getting around with it, and a lot of times. So did you, you know, did your therapist work with you, work with your mom or and your family to say, okay, these are the things you're doing, you need to change that?
yeah, yeah.
A lot of times, and Shireen, thank you so much for your comment. A lot of times with OCD, parents need to be retrained as well.
Hmm.
Certain instincts that mom and dad will have, like, something's wrong with my child, I have to fix it, or distract her from it, or say something like, oh, you'll feel fine, you'll get over with. You kind of have to retrain, because you may not realize it, but you might be enabling a lot of the issues. Like Tori was just describing, her family would say, okay, stay home. So they allow her to stay home and do her compulsion, rather than say, you know what, you're going to come, or you only have 5 minutes to do that and then come out, or something like that. One of the things that people were talking about was, and I think it's interesting, because you were dealing with things all as a teenager, and now you have a different perspective. What's the difference between your parents saying, oh, they're going to accommodate or try to help you with OCD, as opposed to just saying, oh no, this is just Tori wanting to be independent or doing her own thing? Like the difference between how they help you with OCD versus how they can leave you alone and deal with something that might not be.
So if they know that I'm doing like something else, maybe with like a friend or like with my sister, and then I'm like, oh, I don't want to go with you guys, that's different than me being like, oh, I don't want to go, and me being at home sitting on my computer all day long. So that's like the difference.
Getting out and about.
Yeah.
And when you were doing, if you don't mind me asking, when you were doing the therapy program, was it something that you were like, was it an inpatient or outpatient?
So I was doing outpatient, and then that's when I went to residential treatment.
Yeah, and so that was like an everyday intense focus on, learning about OCD, learning, fighting, doing exposure therapy. Did you do stuff with like in a group environment?
Um, I mean, like there were groups, but doing exposures was pretty much individual. But like when I was in residential, the other residents were like so helpful and like so understanding. So,
Yeah, yeah. Were you able to kind of like talk about OCD in a different way and realize like, wait a minute, I'm not alone here? Or, how could you be afraid of that? That's really silly.
yeah, like talking to other people who actually have OCD, they get it. Like they get the struggles. Like it's such like a validating experience. And like we managed to bond over OCD. So, yeah.
Which kind of is something that you talked about earlier about feeling alone, withdrawing from your friends, withdrawing from school, and you realized even before you were diagnosed that I feel different, I'm different than these other kids, and you were kind of withdrawing and being more alone. And then is it empowering to know that there are other kids like you or other people dealing with OCD?
Yes, for sure. I feel so much less alone knowing that other people go through the same things that I go through. Like I would say like anyone diagnosed with OCD or whatever, they should like find some kind of support with like in terms of like other people who have OCD because they get it. So,
Yeah, it's a big learning curve, and when you're able to talk with people who are going through something similar like you are, you're more relaxed, you're freeing, you can start talking about it in a very knowledgeable and educational and funny way. Folks, if you have any questions for us, feel free to throw them in. We can answer at any time. Although I am kind of asking some questions that people have submitted online via our Facebook group. So it was good to hear what Tori was saying about kind of accommodating versus respecting your privacy. How would you describe the point of OCD therapy?
basically, it's very gradual. So, a hierarchy. You start from the lowest thing up to the thing that gives you the highest anxiety. So, for instance, I would have this compulsion where I would be Googling for hours on end. So at first, the first exposure was something like sit away from the computer and think about going on it. Then it would be sit by the computer and look at Google, but don't actually search up anything. Then it got to be Google something, but only go to like the first and second page. Then it got to go to the first and second page, but only click on one link on each page. So it's like, it's very gradual, but it's like, and over time, like habituation, it really, really works.
When you were doing that, could you describe, because one of the things that's hard for me to kind of, and I'm constantly trying to like visualize and try to understand what my daughter is going through when OCD spikes or it's bothering her. Can you describe that feeling of anxiety, or like how would you, like for somebody who doesn't have OCD, how would you describe that feeling when something bothers you or it's really like bad, or you're doing an exposure and you have that anxiety?
It feels like, oh God, I would say that it feels like everything is just closing in on you. And like you get this intense urge, but you just gotta resist. I mean, I I don't really, I would say it's like very, you just feel trapped, I would say. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot of pressure, and it's like you've got anxiety. I'm sure there's stress involved with it. Sometimes you're doing physical things to kind of avoid it. One thing that you touched on a little earlier that I would love to talk more about is you said a support system is really important. Talk a little bit about your support system and how that helps you.
So I have my mom who's amazing, my sister, and then I have like really great friends who don't have OCD, but like they're so understanding. It's like, it's great. And then I'm still friends with a lot of people who have OCD, and like I'm in touch with them like every day because like they truly like get it and like understand it.
Yeah, like there's a perspective that they can offer you, and help each other out. And it's good to think that, so your friends clearly knew you before, and when you said to them first, like, I have OCD, how did you talk to them about it? How did you explain, like, were there friends involved in your ritual, so you said you can't do this anymore? How do you kind of like, I don't know, come out to them about it?
So luckily none of my rituals involved any of my friends, but like they were they're like so understanding. Like sometimes I would like want to hang out with my friend, and then last minute I would be like, "Oh, sorry, I can't hang out," and that was rooted because I had to be home doing one of my compulsions. But yeah, like they completely understood, and like they still like remain friends with me. They weren't like, "Oh, I'm not going to be your friend anymore." Like for instance, I once had this one friend, and this one time she caught me like doing one of my compulsions, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And another time she would like send me text messages, and she was like, "Why are you doing schoolwork all the time? Don't you want to get out and do something like school? Like stop doing schoolwork all the time. Stop being on your computer." So like I'm no longer friends with that person, but yeah.
Do you think that was, her subtle way to say, "Hey, get out and come out and enjoy stuff a little more"?
Yeah, but at the time I didn't understand that.
Sure.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's hard because you are, your life is being taken over. One thing I think that you touched on, which is I hear a lot, and we certainly practice it in our home, is like you're talking about OCD as a third person. So like you're saying my OCD or OCD made me do this, or when I fought OCD, you're almost treating it, even though it's like in here, you're treating it as like the person that's over here, and you're going, stop making me do that.
There was a while in which I thought OCD was me. Like, I just thought my whole life, like, I'm just gonna live like how OCD wanted me to live. But then after getting treatment, I'm able to like externalize OCD instead of like thinking it's myself. I'm like, oh no, this is my OCD. This isn't me.
You have a different perspective. And I would imagine that now you kind of know what's going on, even though you're still struggling, like you were saying before, writing a paragraph, you understand why that's happening. And so you go, okay, this is what I have to do to fight it.
Yeah. I'm like, I have much more awareness now than I did in the past.
Which is huge, because you're constantly able to focus on it. And would you say that are you back in school now?
So right now I'm actually taking 2 online classes through my local community college, and then I'm looking to hopefully transfer to a college within New Jersey, which is where I'm from.
That's great. It actually makes a lot of sense. You a lot of the issues took around school, so in some ways that's a slow exposure. Taking 2 classes rather than taking a full load makes sense. Make sure you can monitor it. And are you taking subjects that you like or subjects that are hard for you?
So I'm taking an English class, which is difficult for me with the writing aspect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm taking this other like government kind of class, which isn't that bad. So.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, you're challenging yourself with the English class, and that involves reading and writing and also analytical stuff.
Yeah.
I'm curious if when you were, you talked about Googling OCD and learning about it, were there any resources, books that you would say this really helped me and you would recommend it to somebody else? We were talking before about the OCD Stories podcast. I'll throw that in the comment. That's a fantastic resource. Any other things that you would say, hey, kid or teen or parent, focus on this, read this, watch this?
The IOCDF website is wonderful. Your film is great.
Thanks.
Oh, there's this one book that I have, Freedom from OCD. Got his name, John Grayson. Yeah.
Yep.
That's all I can think of.
No, that's great. I mean, Jonathan Grayson is fantastic. And I know that if you ever come to an OCD Foundation conference, he always speaks a lot. He's around and visible. And I think this year they do this thing on Saturday nights where they basically, everybody, like 200 or 300 people go out into whatever city it is and they do giant exposures.
Oh, that's so cool.
So you can imagine, like, 200 or 300 people jumping in garbage cans and riding public transportation and like touching things and without washing their hands, or, doing things in public that might be embarrassing, but when you're doing it as a group. So it's like basically like OCD exposure night out, if you will.
Yeah, that sounds like, I think something like that is like really good to like have other people around to like support and like all doing like similar things.
And speaking of that, you have, since 2015, run an Instagram account called Mental Health Facts. What kind of inspired you to start that?
So it started when I was 15, and when I was still in this intensive outpatient program. And so I originally started with it with around 2 to 3 other people. And we just wanted to like spread the word about like all things mental health so that the public is like more aware of things, and to like end the stigma, and like for people to like know that like they aren't alone, basically, and to like provide like support like that.
That's great. And what would you say you try to focus on posting about?
So even running this account is an exposure for myself because I want every post to be just right to me and like perfect. But now I don't really know what direction I'm taking this account with. I just post whatever. But I think I want to focus it more on people knowing that they aren't alone and like
Hmm.
there's help out there and that like they can get better. Like recovery is like possible. So
That's great. I mean, I noticed like OCD week, you were posting a lot of like educational information, like how the cycle works, how it affects your brain, which I think was great, and using the resources of the, what do you call it, carousel story to tell that, motivational posts, certainly motivational quotes. So I think it's really helpful. And it's also interesting that you said it's an exposure for you.
yeah.
So do you ever find yourself writing a post going, all right, I'm going to, put an emoji that's wrong or misspell a hashtag or something like that?
Yeah, there's multiple times where like I will attempt to post something and I'll be like, oh no, this is terrible. Like I can't post this. I made it like there's an error right here. I can't like I have to get rid of this. But now I'm working more on posting something even though that there may be a mistake. So
It's important. Um, and constantly doing little things. Do you find yourself going, okay, every day I have to do exposures, or understanding when if anxiety is creeping up, or you say, oh, this might be an OCD thing, going, all right, I'm gonna focus on exposures now.
yeah, so there's this thing that I do when I'm walking. Like if like one of my steps doesn't feel just right to me, I used to turn around and then walk again. But now whenever that feeling creeps up, I just keep on walking. I'm just like, no, I'm not giving into OCD. I just like keep going about my day.
Um, you know, I it's hard for me to imagine what that's like, but that's a great description of you're walking down the street, this is going on, you could be having a conversation with a friend, and your impulse is to go, wait a minute, I got to turn around and walk that, and fighting it. It helps give me a perspective on like, you're kind of handling multiple things at once, to give people an idea of like how OCD is dealing with different people's lives, or how it affects you at certain different times. It's people, for parents and family members, I think it's really important that they know more about and can understand and get perspective, which is what I think, you're sorry, I'm like plugging in my phone, I'm realizing it's going to die. um, Giving people perspective of it is so helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really important for like people like the family and like friends to know what like OCD is and like what their OCD entails instead of just being like, oh, they're being annoying or like, oh, they're being difficult. And then being like, oh, okay, this is OCD and this is how to handle it instead.
Would you, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in a comment. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. And share this out with anybody you like. And again, if you're watching a replay, we will answer this at any time. So, what would your advice, Tori, be to a parent that is curious about how they can help but not hurt, and make sure, especially when you're dealing with a teenager who, you're trying to deal with your independence, versus just, wanting your own life. How can parents help and not annoy or hurt?
So when it comes to teenagers, I would say that the parent should be like, okay, like they should tell their son or daughter, this is the time that you should set aside to go do an exposure and like, but like not be like naggy about it because at the end of the day, it's like that person's OCD and like for me, like I just do exposures on my own. I mean, there's days where my mom is like, oh, you should go do this. And I'll be like, okay. So I think that's good like that. Um, but I would say for younger kids, actually people like all ages, young kids, teens, that the parents should like educate themselves about OCD, whether it be talking to their child's therapist or like looking up resources on the IOCDF website. Just like becoming knowledgeable about what OCD is.
Yeah, I mean, education is such an important. You got to kind of know how it affects you. Was your sister? Did your sister? You're welcome, Kelly. We're glad that you were helping out, and I know that there's Tori is spouting a lot of wisdom, and I always learn something here too. So part of the reason I like doing this is because I'm learning too, as a parent of a child with OCD, and also just like wanting to know more about it. Did your sister get involved? Did your sister go to a therapy session with you? How did your sister get educated?
So I basically tell my sister about my OCD myself, and she's very understanding. It's like, for instance, like if there's like a day when I'm like, I don't want to go out, she'll be like, you should come, and then I'll be like, okay, I'll go do this. Um, but she's like, in the past, there was times that she would get like upset with me, and she would be like me being difficult, but like now it's like completely different.
She has a bit of understanding and perspective as well.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, you need help with your family members to deal with things, and it sounds like mom and dad, or definitely mom is understanding the boundaries between like helping you do your exposures, but also making sure that you have the ownership and responsibility and independence to do it, and your sister's getting involved as well. I want to kind of wrap this up because I've taken a lot of your time, and this has been really good. So I have my last question is, right now in public, there's a lot of misunderstanding about OCD. I mean, it's one of the reasons you started Mental Health Facts, so that you could kind of dispel wisdom and stigma. When you get conversation, a teacher in class or a friend on the street, or overhear a conversation where somebody says like, oh, this is just me being my OCD, how do you handle it?
So when people say, oh my God, I'm so OCD or something like that, I take a step back and I'm like, okay, this person doesn't understand what OCD is. So instead, I'll take something like that and educate them what OCD really is. Like, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's a chance, rather than scold and go, no, 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 it's a chance to say, hey, involve a conversation. And a lot of the education that you can do is to think about it one-on-one. How can I make that one-on-one, or make somebody think about it slightly differently, so that they can, have a different perspective of it. So that's great. So I got a couple questions here, and I'm going to go through it. So Kelly was asking about their daughter who has a lot of like sexual OCD thoughts. And clearly it's hard. Yes, Kelly, it definitely affects the whole family. And I'm going to say, for the education part, we have a lot of resources on our OCDkidsmovie.com website, as far as books, podcasts, apps, other websites that you can look at to get educated and kind of learn more about how sexual OCD works. That's a lot of intrusive thoughts, so I would highly suggest a website called intrusivethoughts.org. But I'm glad you're working with a therapist. But so how would you, Tori, suggest like little ways that a family can help a kid with OCD?
I would say get involved in their exposures, like do like fun exposures with them, and like I don't know, make the exposures more of like a family thing, but at the same time the child is like truly like doing the exposure themselves. I feel like with more like intrusive thoughts, it's kind of hard to like get like the whole family to do something like that, as it's like really mental. But I would say that support is very important.
Yeah, in some ways, it's just making sure that whatever, if you're working with your therapist, making sure that you have homework that you go with every week. And a parent could be just making sure that you're doing that exposure every day. One of the best pieces of advice we got from our therapist was to say that exposure therapy comes first, more than anything else. So it should come before homework, it should come before play dates, it should come before sports. You have to make sure you're doing it every day. Even brushing your teeth, or making sure that you clean your room, it comes first. And even if it's a little thing, do a little victory every day. And that's kind of one way that we as parents got involved. So there's a question here which I think is an interesting one. I haven't thought of it this way, in that there are certain types of OCD that you can visualize. You're afraid of germs. I get that. I understand visually what a germ is, and I can see you can kind of explain that to them. How did you react with some of your OCD with school? That's not, people would go, well, everybody has stress over a test or something like that. So how did you kind of give people context to your OCD?
So with me, it's very rooted out of fear. It's like I have to do this or else. It's not just me being like, okay, I'm really stressed out about this exam because I want to do well. It's me being like, but what if I don't understand what I'm learning? What if I forget something? What if, like, there's so many what ifs surrounding school. Like, it's like something like a very strong fear, and like something that's like all consuming. Because like other people would be able to like be like, okay, I'm stressed out about this test. And then they'll be able to like say like go to the gym. But me, for instance, it would just replay in my mind all throughout the day. And like that was the only thing that I could focus on, was just like school, 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 everything at school.
Yeah, it was like you're explaining to somebody. It's like looping. It's going on in my mind, where you're able, somebody else might be able to compartmentalize and say, this is when I'm going to focus on that, and I'm going to get relief from my stress by working out or going to a movie or something like that, or reading a book. And you're giving them context by saying, I can't do that because even if I'm doing that, that thought is still going on in my head, or I can't even get to that point because I got to sit at my homework or redo it or reread it. You know, People find, I think, sometimes, Shireen, visual examples are helpful, which is, I think that's why the stereotype of hand washing and cleanliness took hold so easily, because it was easily for media or people to visualize that and talk about that. You can rearrange your drawer so it's very neat and go, oh, that's OCD. So a lot of other types of OCD is hard to visualize. And so it requires a lot more talking about, how it affects you. And by Tori just saying, like, going on in her head over and over, repeating. And people aren't always going to get it the first time. And you just kind of have to keep, finding other ways to talk about it and things like that. And then there was another question that came in is, how did your friends react at school? And, how did you find, when you talking about your OCD, how did you find your friends react?
So I'm really lucky. My friends are absolutely amazing. They completely understand it. My one friend, I remember, she was like was asking me about like what goes on in residential, and very like very compassionate. Like, I'm lucky that they really like, even though they don't have OCD themselves, they're able to like understand it, and like
Mhm.
they're not like, oh, I'm not going to be your friend anymore because of what she, like, because, oh, she spends all day on her computer. Like, they're able to distance it and be like, okay, this is who she truly is. She's not the OCD. Whereas this one other person I used to be friends with, she used to like nitpick me and be like, oh my God, why are you always doing schoolwork? Like, don't you want to be doing something else? Like, why are you studying all day? Why are you on Quizlet? Like, this is crazy. So,
Yeah, it was somebody who you were, the people who are compassionate and supportive, you stuck with, and the ones that were naggy and like bullying you about it, you said forget it.
I'm not friends with that person anymore.
Yeah, and that's kind of even young or old kids. It's something to explain about different than OCD, just like a life skill in general, trying to figure out what's a good friend, what might just be an acquaintance, somebody that's going to stick around for a while and you want to see after school or go to summer camp with, versus somebody that you'll just sit next to in class and talk with every once in a while. When What advice would you give other parents and other kids that might be watching about talking about it in school, talking to teachers, things like that?
So for I would say for younger kids, I don't want them to know that there is nothing wrong with them. There there is help out there. There are ways for them to feel less alone. Because like I remember when I was young, I was like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. Like I'm so different from the rest of the other kids. And like I would like really isolate myself. But I would like let them know that like they aren't alone. And like for the parents, I think like going to like bringing their child to a therapist and then like learning about like resources for helping their child with OCD. I think that's like so helpful. Like something that I want to focus on now is OCD in the classroom in like elementary school because that's when it really started for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like kids getting like help when they were younger, I feel like so helpful. Whereas struggling for years and years.
Right. I mean, you have that perspective of having to deal with it since you were in elementary school and not really getting diagnosed and focusing on it until you were much older, later teens. So, I mean, you have a different perspective to go into with a school and say, this is how, this is how it's got to be treated differently.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the OCD Foundation just launched Anxiety in the Classroom. So that's a new website with a new resource. Unstuck is going to have some resources on that. And the second round that they launched, they're in the middle of kind of adding more resources to that site. So we're happy to report that we're going to have some things on the film that we didn't use in the main part of the film that we created for this OCD in the classroom resource. So it's good to know. Thank you so much, Tori, for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so
Um,
much for this opportunity.
this is really enlightening, and I'm going to put a lot of links so people hopefully will follow you on Instagram, and I know we'll keep in touch. But I really appreciate your help today, and I know that a lot of the people that were watching learned stuff. So have a great one, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too.
All right, talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, everybody, that's Unstuck Kids Speak Out for today. My guest was Tori, and she runs a website called our page called Mental Health Stories, and I will throw the link in. Feel free to follow. You're welcome, Shireen. We'll be back next month with a Kids Speak Out. I'm still working on that guest, but we'll be announcing it soon. Till then, feel free to like and share this broadcast whenever you want. Have a great day.